In terms of what we all did last week, those of us who were here, we went through population health and management, and we talked about the series of webinars and how they all hang together. And population health management is the golden thread that is going to go through everything that we do. It's how we identify our health priorities. It's how we work out what we're going to do about them and how we're going to address them. It's how we bring our teams together around those populations, and how we start to work as multidisciplinary teams across multiple agencies in our systems. So how we start to influence and make change happen. So it's our golden thread throughout. And last week we went through some of that. Now I have got recordings. At the moment, I'm just trying to make sure that they are a recording of not just me looking rather dense, looking at the screen. So somebody is editing them because unfortunately, when you go into your breakout groups, all you see is me, which isn't very helpful at all. So we are going to do something that makes it much more interesting for you. And once we've got them, we will share those. But Janet, can I just ask you just to talk to everybody about what we've talked about doing in the meantime to make sure that we keep everybody up to speed as you keep joining and then maybe not being able to attend?
Yeah. One of the things that we're really hoping is that you'll all start to network, and not just within your PCN, although we want you to start engaging with the workforce, but to start sharing ideas across BLMK. So for those of you in Luton, talk to everyone else somewhere else, and it's entirely up to you how you do it. I think when Claire sends the Zoom meetings out, everybody's email is there. So if you, and because everyone's got their name apart from Rebecca, who is EMIS 2000, but she is on the email list. So if anybody says anything that you think is a really good idea, then by all means, ask or get in touch with that person. I know that there's a chat button at the bottom, and certainly if you press the chat button, it makes the gallery look a bit smaller, and the chat, there's a chat space down at the side. So again, I've already been on a couple of meetings this morning, and so when we're all talking, I can see messages coming up saying, that sounds a really good idea, can you email me that information? So you can get in touch with each other and share stuff, because this is what it's all about. It's sharing best practice. Or if someone says, oh, I did something last year and you're doing that now, ask them how they did it. There's no point in reinventing the wheel, and connectivity is what helps population management work even better.
Brilliant. And we'll try and make sure that there is somebody set up to buddy and bring other people up to speed as well, so that you understand how to get that information from the last time. Quite a lot of you, even those who weren't at the meeting last week, have started to come up with ideas about your projects, which is fantastic. And we've been looking through all of those and responding in terms of how we do this meeting. The other thing that we've been responding to is the feedback that we had from you about how it went last week. So Jag has looked through all of that, and it was really positive feedback. So thank you for that. I'm glad that you enjoyed the session. The really key thing that came out really almost unanimously across everybody was that you wanted more time in breakout groups. So we've responded to that in terms of the agenda. And today we're going to make sure that you actually have quite a reasonable time together in those breakout groups. I'm going to talk to you about what that structure looks like now. So today is all about setting up for success. So last week we came up with some ideas. We've said that the two things that you're going to be asked to do at the end of this is to be working on a project, something practical, leading something within your PCN, and you've come up with some ideas about that. And the second thing is that you're going to share your learning, and you're going to take some of what you're getting out of this and help other people to learn and to start doing things in a different way with you. So those are the two key things. And so today we're looking at how you set those projects up. How do you get started? Now you've come up with an idea, what are some of the things that you need to put in place to really make sure that you can run with it? Quite often we think we're starting something brilliant. We've got this great idea, but we've forgotten some key things, and then it stumbles or it collapses completely. And Nina's going to share a story about exactly that, so that we can hear that. Liz Howarth is who's in my top right hand corner. I have no idea where she is on everyone else's screen. Do you want to wave, Liz? Liz is from the NAPC. She's going to, and Liz is a fantastic program manager, and she's going to share some tips and some templates and things that you can think about in terms of setting up a project. And then, as I said, Nina's going to share a story about the importance of setting things up. And then Janet is going to talk us through some of the methodology around QI, some of the stuff that the Time for Care team is using, and particularly De Bono's 6 thinking hats. And then the predominant time that you're going to spend today is in your breakout groups, and I will tell you, and that's my terror today of my technology, because I've got to actually put you in specific breakout groups so that we connect you as we see that we think the best way. In terms of then coming back into the main group, we'll then talk about, well, so what? So you go into those breakout groups, come up with some of your objectives, and then we'll talk about what do you do between now and next week. Just to remind you, next week's webinar is all about influencing. So it's, once I've worked out what it is that I actually want to do, how do I go and get people to agree to do it with me? How am I going to make sure that I've got all the stakeholders I need around me to make it happen? So that's the focus of next week. Okay, so in terms of going it, I think actually, can I just talk about the way that we're doing the breakout groups, just so that you're not worrying about what we're doing before I hand over to Liz. We were going to put you into breakout groups according to the projects that you come up with. To some extent, we decided not to do that because not everyone had come up with them. But actually, more importantly, we have deliberately now thought it through and decided that actually what we're really trying to do in these breakout groups is get you to talk and to learn together, to think about applying some of the work, some of the principles and the methodology that we've been talking to you about, applying population health management in terms of identifying what those priorities are. So if you come up with pre-diabetes, which a number of you have, what does that actually mean around population health management? What does that turn into when you're describing and defining the group of patients or the population that you're actually thinking about and working with? And even though you've called it pre-diabetes, it might in fact, for the 4 of you who have described it, when you start doing that, it might look like something quite different. So it's really important, I think, that we give you that chance to have those open discussions and not get caught in existing thinking and in existing ways of doing stuff. So we're going to deliberately split you so you have different conversations. As Janet said, though, you can then connect with each other outside of this if you feel that there is something very important for you to get from somebody who's doing something that sounds similar to your work. So I hope that gives you some reassurance. And the other, we're connecting you across BLMK. So as much as possible, I'm going to try and do Luton, Milton Keynes and Bedfordshire. So, and there'll be groups of 3, although of course what we've actually got here and what I've planned for isn't exactly the same. So I'm going to have to really think well, as you're going through these presentations. So any questions so far, or shall I start the next session? All good. It might be useful, most of you have done this, if you put yourselves on mute while Liz is presenting, then we're recording this and that will just make the recording much crisper. I am going to share my screen and make sure that I've got the right one. And Liz, do you want to introduce yourself while I set up your
Yes. Can everybody hear me? Is the volume okay? Yeah, thank you. Because you never know, do you, when you sit in different cupboards in your house, as how it sounds. So just so people know who I am, I also work with NAPC, part of the team. I was just thinking, actually, before I started, I've worked with and in the NHS for over 25 years now. It's almost come up to the 30 mark, which kind of hit me this morning. I thought, wow, I've not actually realised that. So I've done work in all kind of parts of the NHS: primary care, mental health, ambulance service, acute sector, commissioning, and been involved throughout my sort of career in lots of different programmes, projects, from moving residents from learning difficulty, who with learning difficulties, from sort of more institutional care into more home-based care. Worked in Middle East in terms of setting up a whole kind of health village. So in terms of programs and projects, I've been involved and seen quite some very interesting projects and programs along the way, some that have gone incredibly well, almost in spite of what we were trying to do, and some that actually, let's just put, we've learned massive lessons about. And I think, you know, there is something about whatever you do in life, you can always take lessons from it. So, and I think that's one of the things we'll keep coming back to, and particularly when you talk about sort of leadership and learning as a leader. So what we thought we'd do this morning is, or this afternoon, is just spend a few minutes talking about a few things that might help in terms of you thinking about an area, thinking about a project. This is not meant to be something that's like overly technical or challenging in terms of governance. This is about, particularly at the moment in the real world that we're in, some things to think about for yourselves, for colleagues, setting up and leading a project. Some of you may be very experienced with project work. Some of you may have already been part of projects and perhaps not led projects as much. Some of you may have led quite a few projects. I must admit, there's two things that tends to happen at the beginning of a project. Either people get incredibly enthusiastic and really, really passionate and excited about an idea and are gung-ho and going for it 100 miles an hour, which is brilliant. Or other people hear the word project and literally disappear and think, oh my goodness, this is going to probably suck the life out of me, and also I've got a day job to do. So this could be really challenging in terms of working on a project. I think what we're trying to do today is to say, actually, there's a way of kind of navigating and making this work for you, your colleagues, and the project that you're wanting to work on. So in terms of just giving you a few ideas, this is about making this as simple as possible. And one of the slides that we've put up, the next slide, is to say, first of all, if you're thinking about doing a project, one, spend just a bit of time before you sort of launch into it, and I'll talk through some of the things to have a think about. But one of the biggest things that I've learned, and I'm sure the colleagues will be sharing, that there is such a big issue in terms of taking people with you and the acceptance of a project, which I found tends to be most times far more important and has far more weight, or just as much as thinking about or the kind of technical aspects or getting the data right or get the measurements right. It is so much about the relationships, it's so much about the people, and I'm sure you're all very aware and skilled about with kind of what you do on a day-to-day basis. But it is just worth coming back to that, which we will do, and it links actually next week in terms of talking about influence. So that thing about getting people on board, keeping them on board, and allowing them to kind of come on the project and the journey with you is important. So in terms of some things to think about, the next slide, I've just broken it down into really simply the what, the who, the how, and when. So I know some of this may seem like really stating the obvious, but actually it's amazing how many times there can be different versions of this and different understanding of some of these elements. So first of all, it's being really clear, what is it you're trying to do? What problem are you trying to solve, or actually change that you're trying to make? And I'll show you in a minute something called a project charter that can really help just put something on a page really easy, not overly complicated or time consuming. In terms of thinking about the what, sometimes it does take a bit of time because people do have different versions of what they think is happening. And sometimes it takes a bit of time to actually get to one version of the truth of what people think are happening. But again, it's worth kind of spending a bit of time around that and trying to get, I would say, a good enough consensus on what it is you're trying to do. You're probably never ever going to get everybody 100% aligned or agreed, but it is that sense of, are there enough people here that actually kind of count in terms of what I'm trying to do, that understand what we're trying to do and support what we're trying to do. That leads on to thinking at the beginning of a project, who is it that you need to be involved? And that who can be, who are the people you actually really need to get their agreement from? Because I think we all probably know, again, you can have the best idea in the world, as Claire said, but if you haven't got some of the kind of right people behind you or supporting you, that can be a massive struggle and can kind of unpick things as you go along. So have a bit of think about who is it that needs to be influenced, involved, who can give you the nod, who is it that you really do need on board, because if you don't, life is going to be pretty tricky. I think the other thing I'd say about the who, and I was talking to Claire about this yesterday, often you think about job roles, not necessarily the skills. So think about the skills of the people you need involved. You know, for example, some of the work I was doing in London before sort of COVID, in some of the practices there, some of the reception staff were seen in quite a kind of defined way, but some of the skills that they had, particularly with patient engagement, doing surveys with patients, finding out sort of patient stories, things like that, they were brilliant at it, and they were really, really useful in terms of the projects and bringing them on board. You might find, and you'll know them, people you know who are actually really good with data and the numbers, might not be part of their day job, but actually think they'd be really good to have on the project because they are good at that. So again, have a think about who you, if you can involve to support you in terms of the project that you're wanting to work on. I'll come at the end about something called 3Ds model, and I'll mention that right at the end. In terms of the how, some of the learning from work we've been doing at NAPC and in other areas is try, if you can, to go where the energy is at. Again, it's not always feasible if you're trying to work on something where it is a bit of a problem area, or you know actually the reason perhaps it's not as good as it should be is because there are tricky members of staff or people that perhaps don't want to get on board that easily. But if you can, try and work on something to begin with where you think, actually, I know there's some good people that will help me here, or I know we can actually make some difference quite quickly. Tends to make life easier. It's not absolutely crucial, but it does tend to make life a little bit easier. And in terms of how you're going to do things, just think from the outset, what kind of information, data do we need? What do we already know? What else do we need to get? Can we get it? Again, just spend a bit of time thinking about how are we going to start doing this. And I think another thing that's quite helpful for yourself or people as part of a project is almost that spirit of, let's test this and see. We're not going to do anything that's not safe, that's dangerous or puts anybody in a difficult position, but let's test this and let's just see and let's learn and let's revise it and see what happens as a result. Final thing just on this is think about, as you would, when are you going to start it? Are you going to do it for 3 months, 6 months? How long do you need to kind of make a change to make the difference? And how are you going to show that difference in terms of measuring results and keeping people involved? Because I say a lot of projects I've been involved in, people are really keen to begin with, lots of enthusiasm. A month in, the day job kicks in, other pressures come in, gets diluted, and sometimes you've got to, it is planning and having those meetings in advance and planning ways and thinking of ways, how do I keep the right people involved kind of through this time period. Again, sometimes not easy, and you do have to do that, picking up the phone, emailing people, chasing people. So the rest of the slides will just show you. The next slide is an example. I talked about a project charter. I find these really helpful. It just says what you're going to do on a page, who's involved. I think one of the things that I've learnt at my cost sometimes is if you put very clearly the scope of what you're doing and being really clear what you're not going to do as well, because often people come halfway through a project and go, well, why haven't you looked at that? Or why aren't you doing that? And have you thought about this? So rather than derailing you, again, it's very clear going, actually, no, I'm just going to look at adults or frailty or people with complex needs, and being really clear, and I'm not going to try and solve the world all in one go. The next slide just shows you, I talked about how you look at different members of the team, the kind of roles that people you need in the team, what kind of skills, and actually it might be worth thinking about some of those key individuals in terms of their styles. And we're going to, this links into the kind of the 6 hats stuff we're going to do in a moment. What presses buttons for people? You know, what way do they best work or respond to? Are they a pick up the phone person, or are they an email person? So it's some of that kind of stuff to think about. And the last slide, just touched upon earlier, is what is called a 3Ds. So if you're thinking about, and we can cover this next week, about influencing somebody, this is not the only way of thinking about this, but sometimes it's helpful to think, is this somebody, if I want to kind of get somebody on board, a senior partner of a practice or a senior manager, again, thinking about, do they respond best to data and numbers and evidence, and having a strong sense of where's the figures, where's the numbers, kind of show me the money kind of person? Are they somebody who is, the second D is called demonstrate. They like to know, well, where has it happened before? Give me an example. Where's best practice? Give me a case study. Show me where it's working. And they respond to that in terms of getting them on board. And the third area is what's called demand, which I don't necessarily think it's the best term, but sometimes it's using the kind of, shall we say, gentle persuasion of, well, the CQC have said, or there is a target around this, or there is a policy, or this is about, we need to improve standards as part of a PCN or part of the work we're doing. So sometimes people respond to that if they think actually we're an outlier, or actually we need to do something to kind of improve standards. I'm going to leave it there. Just wanted to do that very kind of quick. These are some things to think about. This is not an exhaustive list of stuff. We've got, I think it's Claire said, far more sort of some templates, some tools or kind of documents. If you want anything else, you want to know anything else, you know, do get in touch. But hopefully it's just give you a bit of a sense of, here's some things to think about as you're setting off on your project.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Liz. And I hope that you noticed my deliberate error in putting Janet's slides up first before, instead of yours, but I think I got away with it. Anyway, thank you very much. I hope that was really useful. And just to let you know, everybody, you will be able to, we'll give you these slides. So and as Liz has said, if we can do more around some of those templates, they look really useful to me. And if there are things in there that you would find useful, we can provide those for you. Nina, can I ask you very briefly just to give a little indication of how important this setup thing is before I hand on to Janet? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll just remind people, I'm Nina Pearson, I'm a GP, and I've been a system leader in Luton, and then in more recent years across Bedfordshire, Luton and Milton Keynes, and had some involvement with the national development of primary care networks as well. So my credentials go back quite a long way, and I'm going to tell you very briefly how we got to working as networks in Luton, but partly to illustrate to you some of the problems that can arise along the way, even with enthusiastic leaders. Way back when Luton CCG was formed, there were about 34 practices, and our area director for NHS England, after several meetings with us about trying to improve standards, said, look, you can't get round 34 of them. It would be much better if you group them, and then you're dealing with, you know, 4 conversations instead of 34 conversations. And so at that time, I'm thinking, well, why on earth would GP practices want to work together? What would be the incentive to do that, given that they're all independent businesses and they want to get on with their own things? So we decided that it would be a good idea to try and align services, particularly community services, around the groupings of practices, so that the GPs would feel as if they got a wider team, which some of the older ones like myself remembered having their own district nurse or health visitor or whatever for many years ago. So the groupings were formed based on some established relationships that had happened because of some other work, a bit of negotiation, a bit of diplomacy for people who'd been left out in previous work, and came together into 4 groups and we also talked to community services and said, look, this is what we're trying to do. How would that look for your teams? How do they work now? And because with Cambridge Community Services, we've already got some good relationships, and the lead manager could see the potential that there was with this work. So actually they did a whole piece of work with their teams, looking at workload, skill mix, and aligning the capacity of their teams that met the demand, the patient demand from the groupings that that were formed. And then it was a matter of starting to build relationships, and there was some work that needed to be done at the time that would be beneficial to have some multidisciplinary team meetings. And it was quite a long and painful process to get these established, get the working relationships happening. Despite us at the time thinking, well, these people get on, don't they? And they know each other. And actually we've got some leaders in there, we've got some followers, we've got some experts, we've got some workers. Anyway, we got that moving, and they were developing at different speeds. And then the NAPC had an initiative. They've been talking to national leaders and got a bit of money together to say, look, actually primary care home and creating really cohesive populations, focusing on the population and the workforce around that. We think this is a great idea of how we can change the dynamic, change the outcomes for patients, and actually it be much more rewarding for staff as well. And the chief executive of the Cambridge Community Services knew this was coming up, and there was an opportunity to bid to be an area that, as a test pilot. So Matthew Wynne contacted me as the lead GP in Luton and said, Nina, got this idea, it's coming up, presentations are a week on Tuesday. I think this would be great to do for Luton, what do you think? The two of us are both quite creative, visionary people. So we could personally see the benefits of how we could sell our existing model, of how it could go further. And so I said, yeah, great idea, let's go for it. And so Matthew put the presentation together, we talked it through, you know, had a quick coffee an hour beforehand, went into the room, you know, sold our pitch on how we could see this developing for the future. And we were one of the 15 successful sites. And we were slightly unusual because the lead for this was going to be community services rather than a practice. So we were cock-a-hoop, came back, you know, we'd won this opportunity, small amount of investment, but a great opportunity to create the future. And then we needed to sell that to our networks, our clusters as they were then. And so had a series of meetings. And I have to say that, you know, we were the enthusiasts, as Liz has said, you can paint the vision, but actually does anybody else go with you on that journey? what would help them to create the next stage. And I think what was enlightening at the time was how few other people in the room could see the opportunity of creating the future. They wanted to know exactly what was required, what are you asking me to do, how will I do it, and why would I want to do it? So it really made me and Matthew and our core team sit back and have to do some hard thinking about how do we approach this differently, because we've got this great opportunity. We could see it still was a great opportunity, but helping other people to find the common purpose and to find the thing that would unlock it for them. As Liz had said, you know, are they target driven? Do they need to sort of see that go on the quality standards? Do they want practice and evidence from elsewhere? Do they want actually the opportunity to really create something differently? So we had to stop and think, and we brought in a number of different experts to help with that. But as I say, it really sort of rather took the rug up from under our feet at the very beginning, because actually everybody else wasn't quite as enthused at this creative opportunity that we had won for Luton and thought we were, you know, great heroes for it. So different approaches, and we've moved forward from that, but it was slow at the beginning.
Thank you very much, Nina. That's brilliant. A really great illustration. We said that it was really, it's always really helpful to hear people describe something in action. So we get a bit of theory, a bit of a story that actually illustrates it. And the next thing we're going to ask, I'm going to ask Janet to talk you through some of the methodology, which will take you into your breakout group. So giving you a structure for how you might now go ahead and have your conversations about what the work is that you do. So I'm going to try and make sure I give you the right slide. So
Okay.
bear with me, Janet. Do you want to start?
Yeah, no, that's okay. And while Claire is doing that, just to say, leading on from what Liz was saying, the PDSA stuff, the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle, I've got some good information around the NHS model for improvement, prioritisation matrix, and thinking differently. So I'm happy to send some of the tools out to you as well. And the other thing, that right at the beginning, Liz said about bringing people with you. I was at a day with Helen Bevan back in November, and someone asked her a question. She said, how do I manage to bring people along with me? And Helen said, if you're at that stage, you've left it way too late. You need to start having those conversations right at the beginning. Anyway, seeing as though we're talking about setting up for success, and you're thinking about how to get your project started, one of the tools that we use a lot in the Time for Care team is the 6 thinking hats. And actually this is an idea by Edward de Bono, very, very clever man. I think he's late 80s, early 90s now. He's a Maltese physician, philosopher, psychologist, inventor, and in fact it was Edward de Bono that coined the phrase lateral thinking. And in 1985 he wrote a book called The 6 Thinking Hats. Because he's thinking of, sometimes when we're trying to sort out a problem or a project, it's almost like juggling balls. We can't see the wood for the trees. There's too much information coming in. So if you move on to the next slide, Claire, the idea about the 6 thinking hats is that it's a tool that enables us to look at things from a very different perspective. It definitely should take us out of our usual comfort zone. And certainly there are times when I use this with my colleagues and someone will say something and I think, I hadn't thought about that. So we all have preferred styles of thinking when we approach something, and the idea of Edward de Bono's hats tools is can be really useful. You want to go on to the next slide. So the way I thought I would just illustrate this is using something that we've been talking about in Walnut Tree Health Centre for a while now, and it might just prove helpful. One of the things that we're really looking at is a bigger practice, because certainly we're bursting at the seams. When I first started 11 years ago, my room would lie empty for 2 full days a week when I wasn't there, and many other rooms did. Well, now every single room is used every minute of the day. The back office is bursting at the seams, and actually, because of all the new services which are great for patients, we have very little space at all. So if we were all around the table, we might put on our yellow hat, which is all about positivity, and say, let's have a bigger building. It's going to be so better. We're all going to have our own room. We won't have to move around. We'll feel better. We'll be able to give the patients better care. We could have a bigger coffee room. We could have a meeting room. We could have a designated group consultation room. The back office, we could give them far more room. We'd get more IT in. It's going to be brilliant. We'll extend into the car park, more waiting room. All you can see is the positive with the yellow hat, and that's a good thing. None of these are bad things. You need all of them. And then we might all put on our black hat then, which is all about caution, looking at the risk. Is there a weakness in our plan? And it might be that, well, that sounds expensive. Who's going to pay for it? Are we going to apply to the CCG? How are we going to pay that back? You can't extend where you want to extend because we don't own that land. And actually, after COVID, there's a national crisis. There's a shortage of money. I don't know that this is the right time to be having that kind of building. The white hat, if we'd got to the point where we thought, actually, let's have a go, the white hat is all about thinking about where you're going to get your data from. We need the facts. We need a lot of information gathering. So we need to know, what have we got now? What do we need, and where are we going to get it from? So, of course, things like, well, it's easy to find out who's in every day and what services we have. We need to know what services we might want to offer. We might want to talk to architects that specialise in surgeries. We might want to talk to colleagues who've just had a big refurb and look at the pitfalls. So it's about getting all that information so you can set out on a plan. The green hat, it's all about creativity. It's all about new ideas, alternatives, concepts, and the possibilities of what you can do. So you might want to start thinking about having a fish, an aquarium in the waiting room, something gorgeous. You might want to start thinking about having raised flower beds for the patients to come and do some group work outside. You might actually think, well, before COVID, we definitely had no space at all, but actually, 5 of us now have a laptop, and 5 of us work 2 days a week at home doing virtual consultations and telephone triage. So we're not all in all the time. Our receptionist, Geraldine, went home on day 1 and has done a stonkingly brilliant job of the pharmacy and prescription requests, and we don't plan for Geraldine ever to come back and work in the practice. So actually, do we really need to spend all that money? So it's about looking at alternatives and possibilities. The red hat is entirely about feelings. It's that gut instinct. It's your gut reaction. The same when you might have a patient in and you think, well, they look all right, but I just don't know. There's something not quite right about that. So it might be that you have the architect in front of you who's saying, this is our mock-up for the building. You asked for a bigger coffee room. There it is, a bigger waiting room for patients. The back office has loads of space. You've got more than enough space for tech. And you've got your mother and baby yoga room upstairs. And we all say, absolutely, it's got everything we asked for. But I just don't like it. I don't think patients will like it. I don't really feel about it. Trust that instinct and allow yourself to voice that instinct, because if you voice it, the chances are one of your colleagues will say, oh, it's funny you say that, I feel the same. And then you can explore what it is that you're not really feeling. So it's all about feelings, and you need no justification to say why. It's just a good place to start to explore what it is that you're thinking. The blue hat is all about attention to things like the big picture, the process. Okay, right, so we've got this idea. We think we're going to go ahead. Who's going to keep us on track? Who's going to set the agenda? What do we need to do? And let's start motoring on. There is no set process. There's no, you know, we've got them from white down to blue in this chart, but actually you could start absolutely anywhere. I've used it on my own. You can use it as an individual. We use it frequently at Walnut Tree as a group, and we sit there and we have our post-it notes and our Sharpie markers, and we'll talk about what the issue is, and we'll say, right, someone has a stopwatch, and we'll say, right, red hat, 2 minutes, go. And we all write down our feelings or what information we need or whatever it is the colour of the thinking is. And it's surprising when the 2 minutes ends and we're talking about and we go around, there's some commonalities, and again there are things that some of us haven't even thought. If you're doing it in a group, you must all wear the same hat at the same time. That avoids personal preferences, and it also avoids the conflict between the styles. So you can't have 6 people around the table all with a different hat. It doesn't work that way, but you can do it on your own. So it's a really good tool. You can move on to the next slide, Claire, which is pretty much more of the same. Different people. Oh, you've got 2 of the same. What's the next one? Mine looks different. What is it? So I'll send another one, and mine looks slightly different to yours. But anyway, it's more of the same. If you don't want to use the 6 hats and think, actually, that's not quite me, and we're all very different, there are questions. I'll send this other set of slides out. So the yellow question, that positive, would be, what do you like about it? The black one would be, what are you worried about and what concerns you? The white one would be, what do I need more information about? The red one is, how do I feel about it, or how do you feel about it? The green one is, what ideas and suggestions have you got? And the blue one is, what are we going to do next? So we all do things differently, but I will send both sets of slides out. So when we move into the breakout groups, what we thought we would do is just give everybody some time to introduce their project. And please don't worry if you don't have one, but even if you've got a nascent idea, then let's go with it. And then we can have that whole, let's just literally work through the 6 hats and see, can we help you? Can we give you any advice? Set that problem up to start succeeding. And so that's the thinking. It's a good tool. See how you get on with it.
Liz, could you thank you very much, Janice. I am now trying to set up the breakout groups, and I wondered whether Liz could just take you into those and explain what we want you to do. Thank you, Janet.
Yes, no problem. And I think it's building on what Janet's just said. This is an opportunity in breakout groups, and if you've not been party to one of these Zoom virtual kind of webinar conferences, what will happen in a minute? You'll think that we've all disappeared and it's all crashed, but it hasn't. By the power of some amazing technology, Zoom will put you into a smaller group of people, again, as if you'd like walked into another room together, 3 or 4 of you, and you'll just see a few people on your screen, and the rest of us will sort of disappear for a while. So don't panic. That is supposed to happen. So don't leave the meeting or press anything. It's incredible. It'll sort of do it for you. And within that group, it's to have a conversation, as Janet said, to start talking about a project maybe you've started to think about, or an idea that you've got, in the context of perhaps having a time yourself and each person to go around, if that feels comfortable, to say, one, what's the idea, what's the project? Perhaps as well, when you've looked at those 6 hats, which hat do you tend to normally wear? Do you recognize yourself in one of those hats more than others? And perhaps what will that mean as you leading or taking this project forward? And there can be some real strengths in whatever. It's like, as Janet said, there's no wrong or right about this. It's just a tendency that we have. What's some of the positives about that? What's perhaps some of the things you're thinking, well, if I am always in the I'm super positive, I'm gung-ho, I want to make things happen, what's perhaps some of the things I need to think about on the reverse side of that? And as we keep saying, the other people that perhaps you need to help complement your skill set and your way of leading this. I think then what would be really helpful as you is to think about what support or help you might need as your next steps in terms of starting your project, taking to that next stage, whether that is about thinking about some of the data, and we covered some of that last week, and Jag's here on the call again today with having insight and understanding of what data might be out there in the world of primary care, and we can come back to that. What other support skills that you might need thinking about taking this project forward. So again, what will happen is then Claire, by the press of a button, will magically, everybody will come back into this main group, and we can do some reflections on what people have discussed, some of the things that come out, something that you want to flag in terms of support. And then we can think about, again, what do we do about this, and help think about from the team how to support you taking forwards. Have you managed to do the wizardry background?
I have. So thank you very much for thank you for filling in that gap for me to get the technology. So I'm going to put you into your rooms. I want to give you as much time as possible, which might mean that we have very little time to feedback at the end. But I'd rather, you've all said you want that time in your breakout rooms. I will come in and talk to you to make sure that you're getting that time and check when you want to come back in. If we go over a little bit, is everybody okay with that? Five minutes over will give you the time in the breakout groups. Are you happy with that? Yeah, brilliant. All right, you're gonna go. So see you in a moment. So I think that is all of the groups back. Is anybody looking and thinking, where's my group? I think you're all back. And first of all, I want to just ask each time, and I think some of it's my bad chairing, but I think it's also because of trying to make sure that everyone gets. It's 90 minutes is quite. We're trying to put quite a lot into 90 minutes. I'm just wondering for everybody whether it would be worth extending the next session just a little bit, so that people are you already have in your diary slightly more than the 90 minutes. What's the general view about that? The main thing is to give you the chance to talk in your breakout groups and have a good conversation together.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Yeah. Is everybody, does that work for all of you? Yeah, thumbs up if you've got, there's a little bit of thingy down at the bottom. If you want to do, if you're all happy, I will make that happen. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, that looks like a major consensus. So I'll extend the next few meetings then, so that we have time and we can give you a good discussion group. So I left you in for that time. We're obviously now going to go over for those few five minutes or so. In terms of just getting a bit of feedback then from each of the groups, just how helpful, can we start with was that a helpful process to go through, and did you find were you able to apply some of the thinking hats and the and Liz's processes as well? Who wants to? Yeah.
We've got the thumbs going. Good.
Give the thumbs up. It's so much quicker, isn't it? That's brilliant. Thank you. Excellent. Any feedback on that particular thing? So in terms of the information that you went into those meetings with, could we was there anything that would have been helpful for you to have? So it sounds I'm going to take that, and we will be asking you to do an evaluation at the end of this as well. So please tell us if there are things that we can add into that. There will be a section where you can say whether there are things that could be better. So can I get some quick feedback then from each of the groups, just in terms of some of the support that you feel that's needed? What are some of the things that people are setting up and what they're going to go ahead and do, and any support that we should be aware of? I already know that we need to get you a list of who's doing what across your system, because Susie pointed that out again. So we need to make sure that we know which PCNs are also already working on particular things. What are you all working on, so we can share all of that with each of you. Any other things that people want to share? which group wants to go first?
Well, I'm happy to go first, but it wasn't, although I was in the group, I'm happy equally for Elsie or Debbie to let us know what you found, or Katie, did you find anything helpful, or equally I can do a brief synopsis. It's entirely up to you.
I think we could have done with a little bit longer.
Definitely.
Talk it through.
Well, it goes so fast.
It does.
It does. It does. I found it helpful to know that Katie was more or less on the same lines as me, so it's nice to know that there's somebody else out apart from Lucy who's doing more or less a similar thing. So more people to contact. Yeah.
Everyone seemed to have quite a good idea of their cohort that they've chosen. So there were all three of them very organised. The cohorts didn't seem to be enormous at all, so very workable. That they've been working hard on really drilling down on a cohort to find out everything they could. Everyone seems to be making plans to engage with the wider workforce at work. Some of the pushback was capacity at the moment, and not everyone is fully staffed, of course, and we know that. But actually there was an awful lot of creativity when we put the green hat on around how we're going to reach out to some of our patients, varying from posters in the local shops to virtual group consultations, and engaging the patients, maybe the patient participation groups. I know not a lot of them are active at the moment, but I think that's always a good place to start as well, and engaging patients. And so lots of action already with the three in our group. It was a big thumbs up.
Fantastic. And very quickly, do anybody else want to add just some great ideas that were coming out of your group? I think it's lovely. It's just really good for other people to hear them. So Johnny, I don't know whether that you seem to be having some good discussions in your group. Were there some things that came out there?
There's fantastic stories of the why and the what, which are really powerful. Just remember how powerful those stories are in your influencing. I think perhaps the reflection is that that we probably all assimilate information differently. So I guess within the group there was a sense of wanting to go away and think more about the whole thinking hats, the sort of the success sort of criteria that Liz was talking about, and need to sort of mull that over and think it through. And perhaps, I mean, well, maybe I'm sure that Vicky, Marion, and Nikki can talk for themselves. Whether it be useful for them to be able to talk about that again sort of next week. Don't feel you can't talk about it next week if you've taken it away and chewed it over and it made sense or it didn't make sense. I guess just thinking that there's an opportunity to continue to talk about that next week. We don't have to be completely prescriptive about the agenda. Maybe that's what I'm saying, Claire.
I think that's really helpful, and actually the group I visited, which Jag and Kirsty, you were, I think that was part of what you were talking about as well, going away and maybe reflecting on some of the thinking hats in between now and next week, and also thinking about how you might use some of the templates Liz was talking about to capture some of what you're already doing a lot of. So that sounds great. Okay, so in terms of what we need to do over the next week, I think that gives you some work to take away. And Liz, we'll share some of the, well, we'll certainly share your slides. I think we'll also have a think about which of those should we turn into some templates that we think might be quite helpful. So we'll have a reflection on that. If anybody in the meantime wants to send us something, email us to say we really would like this, then just do that, send something over and we will put it together for you. And we'll find the slides that Janet was referencing in terms of some of the questions to ask yourselves against those thinking hats, because that sounded like that would be a really helpful thing for you to just to use. So when you come in next to the meeting next week, the key thing is to have really had a very clear view about what is the project that you're working on. I heard something in one of the groups about talking about using codes to absolutely start to understand the data and to be able to organize it in a way that you can start to really identify some of the individuals, the patient groups. So I hope I'm reflecting that right. So just working through some of that so you feel you've got all of it. Thinking then about what is that influencing piece? Who is it that you need to influence? About what do you need to influence them? How much is that of just about the primary care network or your practice? How much of it do you think might be beyond that, around capacity and how BLMK works, for example? Because next week we'll come and talk about some of the governance and the ways that the decision making is taken across the system, as well as helping you with just some very practical tips around influence. So if you go away and think about those, that would be great. Is there anything else, Janet or Liz or Nina, that you want to add in terms of prep for next week?
So I would just like to add, have a think about how would I know this project has succeeded? You know, what would I need to measure in order to demonstrate that it's succeeding? Keep it in your mind, think about it.
And sorry, Jag, and I've just put a few things down on the right hand side of the chat: the prioritisation matrix, stakeholder analysis, the NHS model for improvement, and there's a great document that you can just download. It's called NHS Thinking Differently. It's a long document, it's about something like 200 pages, but actually it's got a lot of good stuff about thinking differently and doing things differently, and a lot of useful tools. So it's definitely worth it. It's an easy read, actually, although it's long.
Thanks, Janet.
Thank you.
Just one thing aligned to what Nina was saying about the thing to measure. As I was saying in our group, that it's okay for the thing to measure to be learning, and often that's the right first thing, because reaching for a change in GP appointments or demand, or a change in patient well-being or something clinical, is too much to start off with, and particularly in population health management, where most of it is learning first, because we don't know what the best interventions are going to be to improve population health. It's probably worth making that explicit. So, and that doesn't have to be coded either. It could be written down on a piece of paper. We've spoken to 10 patients and we've learned that 7 out of 10 of them wanted this different, because that's the way that we're going to potentially build an evidence base to bring other people on board, to want to collaborate, and to build an evidence base to doing more complex care model redesign work. Because without that evidence, it's hard to build a consensus and start that snowball. So learning is a perfectly reasonable first outcome, and is probably the right one.
Great, thank you very much. So in terms of concluding then for today, two actions that I just want to remind you about. Jag is going to send you an evaluation link, and we do really value that. We've heard that you need more time, just spell it out, and also any things that you think would really improve your experience and your learning through this process. Then in terms of some of the actions that we've got, we will send out some of these templates and some of the things Janet's just talked about, and we'll start to share also some of the information about what's going on in BLMK and also some of the data about you. One other action from you, and I know Janet's been asking all of you for it, I have got the profiles of all of the delivery team, and I'm going to put it onto our new brand. And you saw the slides that we had. This is the new branding that we have worked up, working with all of you great people to come up with the CARE programme, as it is now called. So we're going to put everything now onto that branding, and it would be fantastic if you could send your profiles, if you haven't already, and I don't know how many you've got, Janet. How many do you need?
I think I've got 6 or 7 so far. There's a few people that haven't. So for those of you that haven't sent me a bit about yourself, it only needs to be a couple of sentences. Then yeah, just write it and ping it over, and we can pop it out.
Is it, Janet?
Pardon?
Just by email.
Yeah, absolutely. Who you are, what you do, and where you are.
Okay, will do.
And what's great about and how you can contact each other So this is the whole thing about this is to try and make it really easy for us to connect. So the information that you put that makes the easier it is, the better. And that's what we will provide for you as a delivery team as well. So some of the expertise that you could get from talking to any one of us as well. I think that concludes for today. And I will make, though the other action is I will make the next sessions quarter of an hour longer. And that, I hope that is sufficient. Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
And have a really good rest of the week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.